everybody, and welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Shelley Pruitt, and these are my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Mr. Ryan Roberts.
Hello,
And you
hello.
guys, we
Hey.
have got such an amazing guest for you tonight. First and foremost, I want to say happy 1 year anniversary, guys. 1 full year.
One full year, guys.
And I am so proud. There's nowhere else I'd rather be, and no one else I'd rather be doing it with than the two of you. And I think that we have the most fantastic guest we could possibly have for our 1 year anniversary. We promised you guys we would make it special. And when this gentleman was kind enough to agree to come on the show with us, guys, do you remember where you were when I called you and I was screaming? He said yes. He said yes.
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 Yep. Sure do. I was at home.
I was jumping up and down on my actually on my friend's porch screaming, he said yes. And I think the reactions were from you guys were, are you effing kidding me? He really
Yeah.
said he'd come on.
Yep.
Yeah.
So who is he? It is Jeff Mudgett, the star of the History Channel show that is currently streaming on Hulu, American Ripper. He is the great grandson of the notorious Chicago serial killer H. Holmes. And if you have not watched American Ripper and seen this story, it is so fascinating. But there's a twist. There is evidence that H. Holmes is potentially Jack the Ripper. And Mr. Jeff Mudgett thinks that he can prove it. So, gentlemen, would you like to bring on our special guest tonight?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
110%.
Let's welcome in Mr. Jeff Mudgett. And viewers, I know you've been waiting for this. Get your questions ready. He said that you can ask him anything. Jeff, sir, we are so excited. I got to ask, how did you find out that you were the great grandson of H. Holmes?
I'm going to get right to your question, but I just want to say that intro you just gave me was the best I've ever had on any show I've ever been on, and I've done a lot. Thank you very, very much. And
Thank you.
I got to tell you, it's an honor being your guest 1 year after you started production, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I actually dedicate an entire chapter to a family dinner where we found out, I was about 40, that my grandfather's grandfather was perhaps the most evil man in American history. This devil in the White City, and hadn't been told. It had been kept a secret. My grandmother didn't even know until that night. And I got to tell you, one of the most shocking scenes maybe I've ever seen was watching my grandfather and my grandfather going back and forth to each other with those eyes, and her just sticking knives in him about why he hadn't told her such a terrible tale, and had allowed her to go off on her hobby, which was believing we were the direct descendants of famous Civil War generals. And she had hired professionals to run that down for her. And then all of a sudden that night, wham, it becomes this.
Wow.
That has got to be one of the most shocking dinners you probably ever participated in. Obviously, because it's stuck in your mind.
There's no doubt about it. And I described, we were all back and forth, and then all of a sudden my grandfather, who was a very quiet, stoic man, he was a senior engineer for Pacific Gas and Electric in California, a good man, stoic man. I tried to capture his character in the book, but he suddenly stands up, slams his chair back against the wall behind him. The family portrait cracks to the floor, and he slams his fist down on the dining table and states, that name will never be mentioned in my house ever again, and storms out of the room. And we're just sitting there with our tongues hanging out.
Wow.
So what thought crossed your mind when you heard that information for the first time?
I didn't really know how serious it was. I had no idea who H.H. Holmes was. I hadn't done any 19th century stuff about true crime at all, other than Jack the Ripper. I'd done a lot of reading, seen a lot of movies about Jack the Ripper, but there was no connection whatsoever back then. And I got to tell you, I tried to capture it. My grandfather made that statement, and then he there was probably 13, 14 people at the table there. And the table to each of us, and then stops with me and just stands there staring into my eyes. And I can still recalling it for you here tonight. I was thinking, why, wait a minute, how am I involved in this? Why is he stopping with me? Keep going, old man. Keep going. I just want the apple pie.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that's it.
Yeah. Grandma's apple pie was famous, and and I was practicing a law in California at the time. I had done some historic work for the California bar pilots, the guys that drive the ships in and out of the harbors. I used to defend them when they'd have an accident, and so I had some assistants back in the office. And when I got back that next Monday, we did some research on who this man was, this H.H. Holmes, and lo and behold, it was worse than I could have imagined.
And for those of you that don't know, H.H. Holmes' real name was Herman Walker
Webster.
Herman Webster Mudgett. See, I knew I was going to get that wrong. Herman Webster Mudgett. My apologies. I actually know this. I'm a little giddy to be talking to Jeff. So forgive me, Jeff.
So you know what? Making mistakes about Herman's names or alias is quite easy to do. He had 41 different aliases during his criminal life.
Golly. Wow. I mean, he was just a top criminal scammer. I mean, he had everything nailed down to a T to get away with what he got away with. I mean, this man was, I almost hate to say, but a criminal genius.
He's brilliant.
With the way that his mind worked, as horrific as his actions were.
You're exactly right. And, I found recently going on shows like yours, great shows, that, when I used to do these shows, it used to be pretty much half the hour we'd spend arguing how many people he actually murdered, or was it legend and lore about 30, 40, 50, 200, whatever silly number that history had thrown out for so long. And every one of them unfortunates. But I can feel it now that the momentum is changing, Ryan and Blake and Shelley, that the story is now much more about the criminal mastermind, the con man, the fraud, and some of the masquerade he was capable of pulling off, in Chicago and Philadelphia, New York City and Boston, and some of the great American cities, and fooling all of the police forces in those cities. And that's the real story. Obviously, whether he killed 9 or 13 or 27 or 54, no one will ever know. That's one thing that I tend to try to bring up on all the shows I go on now. There was not one eyewitness to any of his murders. I mean, we all know that he destroyed that last little family while the police were running him down there at the end. The two twin girls, the little boy, the husband the father that he went to trial about. And then some of the methods used to almost pull off being found in that trial with those children are as horrible as I've ever seen at trial law. And so what you say about genius, criminal mastermind, all those things is true. This was one of a kind. And the thing that I always find sad and hard to understand is, he went to University of Michigan. He graduated from medical school. He had his degree, license to practice medicine. He could have pretty much been anything he wanted to be. And instead, he wanted to have a murder castle while the World's Fair was 2 miles down the road in Chicago.
And
Yeah.
it was prime. Prime, I don't even know the right word to use. Hunting ground for that sounds horrible to say, but prime hunting ground for him, because I mean, you have this World's Fair that's happening that far away with all these people who are just flocking there, that are leaving families behind, traveling alone, and all that kind of stuff.
There's no doubt about it. I always tend to come up with the image of a lion in the savannas of Africa, that World's Fair. I mean, one day there, I believe there were 700,000 people there. And I had a Hollywood scriptwriter send me his idea on a scene, and it was of two little young ladies, high schoolers, from middle America, getting off the train there in Chicago, eager to see the fair, to see Edison, to see the first Ferris wheel, to see every invention going on at the late 19th century, right there and then, and having to find a place to stay for the night, and then being directed to the hotel with Herman standing there in the door welcoming them to Chicago. And it was it's quite a scene if you imagine that first from a horror drama.
Yeah.
But I think that's what happened. That's what happened there. There was a lot of people that went missing during the fair. The Chicago police will admit that in their records, that they never discovered the whereabouts or what actually happened to them. And but every once in a while you'll watch the Chicago news, and the lake level will change, and then all of a sudden the geologists, the anthropologists there from the great universities will find another skeleton there from the 19th century, or in the river. Do you remember American Ripper, when his just looking in the river there for the concrete that the one scientist we had going with us believed that Herman had actually he had a concrete factory, he had a glass factory, which he never sold to commercial interests, which I always found strange, for obvious reasons. But we found blocks in the river, and then it was winter. The budget was over. History was ready to call it quits. We were doing the exhumation. They were spending a lot of money on that, and so we pulled back and got back to the main storyline. But I'll never forget, I was at a book signing there, and Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Remember Rahm Emanuel, Obama's chief of staff when he was president? He had an assistant that ran over and said, wait a minute, why didn't you guys come and ask us for permission to go check out those concrete blocks you found? The mayor was interested in you guys doing that. And I was like, holy mackerel, how close we came right there.
Yeah.
So you've never gone back and tried to get the blocks out?
Oh God, it would cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. The exhumation cost us it cost history over $1 million. And that's that's one of the things I like to do now on your shows, is to tell all your listeners, hey, listen, history did a fine job. They're not like other networks. They're not like, some show that brings up, they could have brought up some so-called expert to give his opinion about what was in that grave. We got lawyers to get us permission from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They hired engineering crews. We got the archaeologists, anthropologists from the University of Pennsylvania, and we exhumed those graves. And history is to be applauded for that, and the money they spent doing that was very expensive.
Yeah.
I think we need to start a GoFundMe, guys, right now, and we got to go get those blocks out of the bottom of the river right now. I got 5 on it. I'm serious.
So I have
No, there is no guarantee they belong to Holmes. So I'd hold off on that yet. But it was interesting. It was a full development. If one day someone wanted to go a little deeper, excuse the pun. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Jeff's got jokes tonight.
Yeah. So Jeff, question for you though, because I want to kind of take it back to the moment that you found out that you are related to essentially America's first notorious serial killer. What did you do? I mean, you obviously, if you're like me, and I hope you are, that you just wanted to know more. So what was your process to find that out, and how do we get to Jack the Ripper?
I was always of that type. I was always growing up. I was always interested in Pearl Harbor. I was always interested in, historic discovering the different viewpoints and concepts, theories, all those things. And well, lo and behold, right up on my front porch was this my great grandfather, who they had to invent new terms and characterizations for. He was so horrible. The first serial killer. Obviously, there were other serial killers before him,
Right.
but the first one they used that phrase for. The first. What's the it's skipping mine. What's the psychotic term for serial killer now?
Like sociopath?
Starts with a P. Oh,
He's
yeah,
very prolific.
psychopath.
Yeah.
They invented all those things for this man. He wasn't a Gacy or a Bundy. This was someone, like we discussed earlier, could have been anything he wanted. So I started digging in, and as you may have, as any of you have done, looking into Holmes. The interesting thing about the Holmes story is, the more you dig into any aspect of the story, the more you find, the more new discoveries you have. It never seems to stop. So I'm digging away, and I'm contacted by very distinguished historians, true crime experts, who tell me that for years now they've believed Holmes wrote the Dear Boss letter, the most infamous Jack the Ripper letter there was, the one with Jack the Ripper on the bottom in the signature. And and I'm like, no, come on guys, we're talking about, I've got an ancestor over here that was hung by the neck until dead. Let's leave it at that. We don't need. And now then they kept pushing, and then they showed me the comparisons between the Holmes handwritings they had, and then the Dear Boss letter. And I'd done some handwriting comparison work in trial. And anyone can see those comparisons just with an amateur naked eye. You can see how similar they are. Heck, I had a retired ex-FBI agent contact me and say, hey, just look at the idiosyncrasies on each of the capitals. They're remarkably similar. He said that the FBI had actually talked about that. And most people don't realize, but our FBI actually did a formal report on Jack the Ripper. And if you Google it up, it's a great read. And one of the guys, the agents that was working on that, contacted me and said, he said, we were following you in that comparison work. And we were happy to see that you finally got over to the University of Buffalo and the Cedar Fox guys. And that's who the FBI, that's who the CIA, that's who Scotland Yard even uses to compare handwriting for their true crime investigation work. And so the idea that Holmes was also Jack the Ripper was there long before me. I'm just the one that actually came up with a method that you could take that type of evidence into trial and get it admitted. And those scientists there came back with a 97% number, and they said remarkably similar. They did not say direct match, okay? They did not say that. It remarkably similar, and they said 97%. They said if we allowed them and gave them some more backing, they could work on their programming and possibly get it even higher than that comparison. Which, when you think of it, what are the odds? What are the odds that at the same time you've got this terrible killer in America, right? America's worst monster maybe ever. You've got Jack the Ripper in London, and it's just a coincidence that they have the same handwriting. Hard to buy, and it's the odds of that are way out there, and then when we did the American Ripper show, History Channel funded us to have a couple of very famous English linguists work with us, comparing that Dear Boss letter with the Holmes work, and they came back with an opinion on the show that was an American who had written that letter, probably with medical knowledge. So you're moving into more coincidences, more and more. But the problem with Jack the Ripper, guys, is there was no eyewitness ever to any of the killings. There were pictures, there were no fingerprints, there were no blood types, there were no photographs, none of that stuff, of the killer. You had a couple photographs of the victims. Yeah. But nothing that you could ever prove. What you're dealing with, Saucy Jack letter and the Dear Boss letter, are probably the best pieces of evidence you're ever going to have a shot at
Jeff,
identifying who Jack the Ripper was.
Now, Jeff, I have a question. There was something that I found extremely compelling. And what that was whenever you found the box of, and I believe it was in Illinois, there was all of this stuff about H.H. Holmes. And of all things, the tintype of Catherine Eddowes was in the box. What are the chances of that? One of the Ripper victims being in this box of H.H. Holmes photos and news articles. And we know he liked to collect pictures. How in the world does that end up in that box?
Well, I got to tell you, if you have seen a tintype of Catherine Eddowes?
No, wasn't that in the box on the show American Ripper? That picture was found in that box?
I don't recall. We found some surgical equipment, that was made in London.
I remember
that. We have photographs of my great grandmother in that equipment that Holmes had. Clara. But I don't remember a tintype of Catherine. Obviously, that it would be an earth-shattering equipment. If we can come up with that together, I'd love to find it.
Gentlemen, do you know the box that I'm talking about? Because I'm almost sure it was that gentleman in Illinois that had the box.
I will say that I do remember the box. However, I do remember there being a tintype in it, although I cannot recall who was on the tintype right now.
Okay. I was almost certain it was Catherine Eddowes because I started taking notes. I'm like, how in the world does a Jack the Ripper victim get into this box? I will go back and double check my research on that because I found that crazy. But another thing I found fascinating were the ship manifests. That how do all the killings in America stop and begin once either H.H. Holmes travels over to London? We know he was there at the same time. His aliases can be put on the ship, and then they all stop in London and begin again. Then when he goes to New York, Ripper-like killings begin. And as he dots the country, Ripper-like killings are found the whole way. And wherever they were previously, once he leaves it, they stop. Those ship manifests are probably the most compelling evidence that I saw presented on American Ripper. You can prove he was there, and they started when he arrived, and they stopped when he left.
Yeah, the manifests, the ship's manifests are very probative. We did not find one with H. Holmes or Herman Webster Mudgett on it, but like you say, there were some of the aliases he used. They're very common names. It'd be very hard to take that into a court of law and get it admitted. It does add another factor to the issue. Shelley, the most important part of the puzzle for me is we know the exact date that the Catherine Eddowes murder occurred. We know the date that the Dear Boss letter was submitted to the police. We know when the police submitted it to the press for release. When you run those together, whoever wrote Dear Boss had to have been in London. All right. There was no way he could have been across the Atlantic and have those dates work out. And it was that, that I don't think there's any problem proving he was there if he wrote Dear Boss letter. And one of the interesting, I'll tell you, the retired FBI agent who asked me not to use his name on shows like yours or television, the one that worked on the Ripper report, he told me the mistake I made was the comparison done. And he said it was a mistake that the FBI had made many times and had learned to do right. I should have taken a sample from the Dear Boss letter. Okay. I should have taken a sample from the Holmes correspondence, not identified either one. Just run those samples through the scientists and their computer program. He said, had they known, and you know what, these are very honorable guys. They're very distinguished. They work for the highest, organization, law enforcement organizations in the world. He said, but once you showed them, we were talking about Dear Boss, and once you showed them Jack the Ripper, once you showed them H. Holmes, he said it would have put a pause to them about jumping in, calling this a direct match. He said, had you done it the way we do it now, just those samples, he said he believed that the entire world right now would be discussing how Jack the Ripper was solved. So I made a mistake.
Wow.
So the Batty Street Lodger, who was the I think he was he was at a boarding house that was pretty close to one of the Jack the Ripper murders, and he if I'm not mistaken, he matched the description of Holmes. What do you think about the Batty Street Lodger, and do you think it was a case of mistaken identity, or do you think that is likely it could have been him?
You know what, Ryan, when my revision comes out, the entire Jack the Ripper chapter has been rewritten, all right? It's 30 or 40 pages of how I think it all happened. And you're going to see that I believe there was one man, 5 victims. I think Holmes wrote Dear Boss and murdered Catherine Eddowes. He did not murder Elizabeth Stride. He did not murder the Nichols or Chapman victims. He did not kill Mary Kelly. He was just there on business. He was fascinated with these headlines going across each paper there in London. And he decided to jump in. Why? I have no idea. He knew he could buy a ticket home and just get out of it if he wanted to, which is what he did. And he went home. But while we were there filming American Ripper, and we were staying in the London hotel, the crew was down working on the next day's shoot in the fire pits. And I was up at the bar by myself. They didn't want me there with them interfering with their work. So, yeah. But I was sitting at the bar, and it was a gentleman, 30 years old, suits, ties, very well cut, came up, introduced themselves as Scotland Yard, and told me that while they had been following my progress, they had been watching the production on American Ripper in London. While they did not agree with my theory that Jack was H.H. Holmes, they did agree that there had been a copycat involved that had never been one man and 5 victims. And I thought that was quite astounding.
Yeah.
That definitely would put a spin on history, that's for sure. To what everybody believes to be socially acceptable.
Yeah, I'd like to see someone just run an experiment to see if they basically know where the Elizabeth Stride murder occurred that night. They know where the Catherine Eddowes murder occurred. They pretty much know the times of each. They can make an accurate assumption, possibly. I'd like to see someone like History or one of the English production outfits actually run those two through an experiment to see if it's even possible that one man killed both anyway.
Yeah.
That would definitely be compelling and something I would like to see as well. So, Jeff, I have another question for you. So, in your research and learning what you were learning about this not only fascinating and horrifying ancestor of yours, what would you say is the thing that astounded you the most in your research? What did you find that you literally went really? What was the one thing you found that really shocked you about him the most? I've stumped Jeff.
When we went down into the when we went down, that's a great question. When we went down into the basement at the post office, and I write about it. There's a full chapter on that first time we were given permission by the superintendent there at the post office. We found 2 of the original Murder Castle brick tunnels down there. That astounded me the most. Now, why would the federal government have allowed those to remain? Why? That's the kind of thing, Ryan, that always bothered me with historic mystery. I've always been more the type, wait a minute, come on. Why would the federal government have bought the Murder Castle when it was a later day building in the 1920s, 1930s, whenever it was? But they knew what it was before. They knew what had gone on there. They knew that there had not been full investigations of the suspected homicides that were thought to have occurred there. And they knew by buying that, tearing that building down, covering that little parkland to the left, if you've watched the show, that little park and grass next to the building that overlaps somewhat, but the post office is not directly over the top. Why? The federal government had to know by doing that they were violating countless statutes, numerous Illinois laws. There were homicides that might have occurred. There were no statute of limitations on those crimes. Somebody should have investigated those. They bought the building, tore it down, and put up the symbol of our justice, the post office, over the top. When they had 4 other corners to put it on right there. They didn't need to have that one. And that's the type of thing, Ryan, that's always caused my mind to twist and turn.
Do you think they did it because, like you said, they kind of wanted to reclaim the land and put something positive there to reclaim the area?
I think they had to be careful about the statutes and the laws that they were involving themselves with. There were homicides that occurred there, in my opinion. Now you'll get people that'll come on, naysayers and doubters, who say I can't prove there were murders that occurred down in that basement. And you know what? They're right. We're dealing with a criminal mastermind who was the leading expert ever in American history about the removal of any evidence following a killing. The best ever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He went to school learning how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then he did it. And that's how he made his living, defrauding life insurance companies, falsifying dental records even. So when they say you can't prove there was a homicide, no, I can't prove. All I can prove is there was a furnace down there with temperature sufficient to melt bone
Mm-hmm.
and pits of chemicals that he was an expert chemist at applying, removing any trace of one of his crimes. So, that has always intrigued me. That has always, it'll be something we never prove about the story. It's something I hope those geniuses in Hollywood, Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio, do right. I hope they do. They've got a great opportunity to have hundreds of millions of people just fascinated with their story.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jeff, we know that those tunnels, or we think those tunnels, have never been explored. If you ever get them to do a season 2 of American Ripper, I will personally volunteer our services to be your paranormal team to go in and explore those tunnels for you.
All right.
We want to do it. We're in, guys.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, I'm in.
Absolutely. A question I was going to ask you too. You said that you have people that come to you and say that you can't prove that a homicide occurred there. I don't understand how they feel that way, because we can deduce that happened because we know of the lime pits, we know of the furnace, like you said, the grease chutes in the building. I don't understand how, and the gas. How I don't understand how anybody can say that there was nothing like that occurred there. That blows my mind.
One of the things I've learned in these years on this story, investigating, is once someone has made up their mind about anything involving Holmes, you're not going to change their mind. Even it's while we were doing the exhumation, and right now I'm trying to get history to take a second look at the evidence. But this time allowing me the help of an ex-FBI agent to look at it as a crime scene. When we went down there on the American Ripper, and the scientists were awesome people, brilliant scientists, some of the best of their field. But we were looking at it as, an archaeological dig, maybe akin to discovering Native American arrowheads. That wasn't what we had here. We needed someone that did true crime investigation. We needed someone that knew forensic science. We needed someone that every piece of evidence that came up out of those two graves, one with an empty coffin in it, which no one wanted to go in with me and discover why or figure out the purpose, and they just kind of blew it off. And then we found a concrete tomb encircled with these timber planks, which none of the newspaper accounts had reported accurately. And that could not have been lowered down as they reported, during, of their reports of the grave. It had to have been made over. And there was a, have any of you been, did you say you've been to Holy Cross Cemetery?
I
have not.
No.
That's something you should try doing if you're ever in Philadelphia. Go out to the cemetery and go to the Holmes grave, and see what feeling you get from the tree that's over the top, from the mausoleum that's down the lane a little bit. But the reports had it that when he was hung, he was taken down. The prison physicians checked his neck, his vertebra, to see, and they made their official report of cause of death, as they're required to do by law, that it was by the hanging, that he had a serrated vertebra, axis and atlas vertebra. Well, when we dug him up, whoever him is, and we pulled that that eat body out. These excellent scientists and the history engineers, the first thing they saw was that these perfect teeth and jaws were there. And they immediately went for those. And then that physical report that the Chicago dentist who had showed up out of the blue one day at the prison before the hanging and had conducted an examination on the inmate, including creating dental casts with these teeth molds, a physical examination of a man going to be hanged. He wasn't going to have fillings done. He wasn't going to have, braces made. But then all of a sudden, these teeth molds are showed up. And
he had never allowed that to be done before, correct? Never allowed a dentist or a doctor.
Great point. He refused every other doctor that requested an examination while he was in prison. And lo and behold, he consents to the Chicago dentist. So all of a sudden now these scientists, and that's what they, and they figured out this was great evidence. So here we have these teeth, these molds. They run it down the University of Pennsylvania to the dentistry department there, who has great dentists. And they say, yeah, they're the same. You guys have identified. And they take it to the judge in history, and we end the show with dental records have ID'd the killer, the man in the grave as H.H. Holmes. And I'm in the background screaming and yelling and jumping and up and down, and they set me aside. They're just trying to get out. I'm saying, wait, you guys, I have the scientists on record saying there's no cause of death trauma to the neck.
Mm-hmm.
We have the reports from the prison physicians stating that it was broken. They're telling me the skeleton's too short to be Holmes from what the Boston police wrote in their arrest report. All these things. And see, guys, that's why I'm trying right now, as gentle as I can, to get history to take a second look with someone with true crime experience that knows you can't just overlook something like no cause of death trauma to the neck. You've got to be able to explain why that is. And if it doesn't work, wait a minute, then we've got to go the other. Yeah, and if that doesn't work, you've got to go the other way. Wait. This man made a living falsifying dental records to defraud life insurance policy.
Yeah, exactly.
See, and that's what I was up at. Now, and like I said, those scientists are awesome. The History Channel, all of that. But I think someone needs to take a close, as I think we're looking at something that's going to make Jack like minor league. It's an amazing con on the American criminal justice. And that man walked out and created a new life for himself with a new alias in California. I don't know where, I don't know what, I don't know when, but that's what I'm thinking.
Really?
You did tell us, is this the news that you said that you were going to break for us about the dental records? Is that what you had promised us something new for the podcast? Is this the bomb you just dropped for us? Was that there might have been false teeth involved?
And I'm trying to get history. I'm trying to get someone at history to go, you know what? That crazy Mudgett may have something here. We need to take another look at that.
So in your mind,
and they may say no. They may say no.
Right. And
they may say no. They already spent $1 million. We don't need to go back digging him up again. We have the evidence.
Right.
But do you?
Yeah. Well, we have all the evidence. The scientists at UPenn have it all on record, on file. They have it all. We have my DNA. We have the skeleton's DNA. We have all that stuff. So it's just the only thing we don't have. The only thing we don't have, Blake, is why did the Chicago dentist show up out of the blue one day to do a physical examination on an inmate, which included dental files and a dental cast photograph? Why?
Makes no sense. I mean, trying to track him down even after his death, I can only imagine how hard it was for the authorities to track him down back then. But it's like you're searching for a Batman villain. This dude is a real live supervillain, and everywhere you turn, it's just another labyrinth to go down to try to figure out what's going on.
You don't know how right you are. There were authors, writers, historians who, for a while, actually talked about the Holmes curse.
Mm-hmm.
This thing which happened to people that had been involved in his arrest, his incarceration, the trial, that had upset him, and many had terrible misfortunes occur in their life. And they actually wrote about Holmes' curse, and then they all thought, "Nah, that was silly. That's silly. You're getting into the paranormal. You're getting into those things." And it just, the puzzle always, see, that's what I was telling you earlier. When you investigate this, the puzzle always seems to, another piece comes out and fits. And it's something that when you do it, like I have for these last years, you just have to be prepared for one of your listeners to write in and say, he's full of baloney. The man was hung and buried there. And you know what? It's very possible they're right. I just find it interesting that everything about this man has a terrible coincidence involved. You know, it's like Shelley brought up those the ship manifests on the passenger list going from New York City. You know, just another coincidence. And how the FBI agent told me, look at the capital letters, how the idiosyncrasies on each capital letter are exactly the same. He said, that's exactly the stuff we used to look for. He said, look at it. And you know what? When you guys check it out, check out my TED Talk, you'll see it. They're exactly the same. And it's just, you know, I have quite a few fans in London that are excited about this moving ahead. They're actually the English people would like this. The English people would like this.
So I have just a couple of questions for you in that sense of with his exhumation and in the grave. And I know a couple of people have already put in the comments over here. In your research and finding out all of this, were you able to find out exactly maybe who was in the grave? And if you were killings starting up somewhere else that matched?
When you read my revision, you'll see I throw a name out there, but it's just assumption on my part. And when I warn people about, you know, bloodstains redux. I take a lot of liberties. I fill a lot of gaps, and I use some imagination to write that part of the story, because there are no records, there are no accounts, there are no logs of anything at Moyamensing prison and anything unusual occurring, other than the account of Holmes being hung that day with the hood on, things like that, which I found fascinating as well. And how, you know, he his little talk there on the scaffolding, how the two prison physicians wrote out the report, all fascinating stuff. But you know, you're also talking about the same prison where 3 months after the hanging, the prison superintendent was said to have blown his brains out up in his office at the prison. And, you know, and obviously if something had gone on there, if Holmes was able to escape, he would have had to have needed help. He couldn't have done it himself. You know, they were treating him strange. He was given a writing desk. He was allowed to wear his doctor's clothes there in the prison, his boots, his hat, his tie. I mean, the artist depictions of him writing at his desk in his prison cell are shocking to take a look at. And it's and you know, he wrote his memoirs there and sold them to the Hearst Corporation for $7,500. Which was a fortune back then. He also, his first wife, Clara, my great-great-grandmother, made 3 visits to see him while he was in prison, and then made 3 trips to Chicago and then came back to him. I'm convinced that was to get more cash, more assets for what he needed to buy.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And he bought 2 graves. He bought fake coffins. All those things. The one coffin we found, Ryan, had a clay material in it.
Wow.
It was full of this clay that you could shape the shape of a body in. And when we found one of the artist depictions from, I think, the Philadelphia Sun, no photographs. That's another thing that drives me nuts. Why were there no photographs of the burial? Why were there no photographs of the hanging? Why were there no photographs of Holmes in his prison cell? Why none of the body like you see of every other criminal after they're hung?
Because it was mostly just drawings and etchings.
This one artist, that's all they were. This one artist depiction had that coffin we found in the one grave right immediately adjacent to the other one. The one was at 8 feet depth. The one was at 10 feet depth. When we dug up the one coffin, it was a plywood coffin, the type they used to transport bodies on trains. And it had this clay material in it that you could have molded to look at that artist depiction shape of a body inside. And over time, it had just settled out. But that wasn't considered important. During the exhumation, we moved over, dug down deeper, and then found the concrete and the timber. We opened it up, and there was so that everyone was on their discovery. Where I was back up on that, what was that fake coffin about? What was going on? So
yeah, I mean that is
fascinating stuff.
That is absolutely fascinating. That there's just another coffin with some material sitting in there at the bottom next to Holmes's grave, or what we think was Holmes's grave.
I mean,
Well, he was a master con man until the end. I mean,
Yeah.
he was even conning you on, am I in the grave? Am I not in the grave? Am I in the grave? Am I not? Come on.
Yeah.
He was keeping everyone guessing until the very end. And Jeff, can you please touch on just a little bit more about the Holmes curse? Because didn't the judge and a juror and several other people meet with awful, awful fates about that? And how did it come to be known as the Holmes curse?
Well, the prison superintendent, one of the newspapers wrote it, came up with it. The jury foreman had a terrible end. There was one of the lawyers that worked on the case had a terrible end. The judge was fine. I actually used my fictional ability to part out in the book about Holmes visiting the judge, but deciding to let him live. And so you might enjoy that when you get a chance. But the judge had a fine career in the law after. It was a strange number of people that were associated with him that had terrible ends. And obviously, if the man was dead, hung by the neck until dead, it had nothing to do with Holmes, then we're getting into everything vaguely paranormal, right?
Have I mentioned this
Holmes
is my favorite
visiting these people? Well, and if he escaped, but if he escaped, there was nothing paranormal about that. That's the way this man thought.
Yeah. Yeah. That would make absolute sense on that.
And you were saying he was going back to his stay in prison. You were talking about how he was afforded a lot of things that most prisoners weren't. We know that he was very charming from all the accounts of people who knew him. And, so I think that may have something to do with why he was afforded so much. He probably charmed everyone around him. Do you think he could have charmed his way out of the hangman's noose?
He was a prisoner celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. No, if he could con, or if he could defraud, if he could charm, manipulate, he was the one. And that's why that when the people that want to argue against him being this terrible monster, they bring up that how so many of his accounts in his memoirs were out and out lies, and the man was a pathological liar. He was. And I don't, and then in the next sentence, those same people will use Holmes saying that he only killed 27 to prove that he wasn't the huge serial killer that history has him at. And I kind of fall back on, well, how are you using that statement as truth now when you say everything he said before was a lie? So it's those are things we'll never prove. Those are things we have to look at. They make sense. I don't know that's why I'm proud about those handwriting comparisons and using scientific, evidence, forensics that our leading organizations also use. And I'm proud about having talked history into exhuming the grave. We didn't just stand over the top and have two experts give opinions and then call that the American Ripper. History, when we were exhuming those graves, the walls were caving in on us on each side, and there were bodies, innocent victims, innocent buried, cadavers on each side. History called in these incredible engineers to shore them up. Cost them a lot more money there too, and so they did a great job. They did, and that evidence still exists. All I need to do is talk them into. We need to re-examine that evidence, but with someone who understands the Holmes mind, what he was capable of being up to at that very moment.
I actually have a viewer question that goes along that lines with his mind. That came in from Tyler. He said, "Do you think that it was his?" And this may be a little rough because it is your family, and it comes down to you. But do you think that it was his nature to become a killer, or do you think it was more his nurture? And do you know anything about his childhood or his parents?
Oh, good question, Tyler.
I don't know a lot about his childhood. The Wilmington, New Hampshire. If you ever get a chance to visit, his house is still there where he grew up. The church is still there. The school he went to and then actually taught elementary school is still there. Think about that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's chilling.
If you ever get a chance, visit Gilmington and see if you get the sense of a presence when you're walking around. I always do when I go there. That's one of the reasons why I love talking with you here today, because when I first went down into that basement at the post office, I wasn't a believer in the things you guys believe with all your heart. I didn't believe in the spiritual. I didn't believe in the supernatural. I didn't believe in the paranormal, any of that. When I came back up, and I try to capture it in the book, I knew there was something down there. I knew that I had felt something different. And it's I've been for years now trying to get one of the big ghost hunting teams, one of the technically advanced ones, maybe to go down with me again to see if they can record something unusual down there, because I know how many people believe in ghosts in America? With 60, 70, 80 million? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a lot.
If we could find something with the top technology, and me hooked up to the medical science, and to have it come out again like it did that day when I was down there with my friend, I think it would be, well, think about it. I try to capture it in the book, I couldn't get around any other way but to call it the greatest scientific discovery in all mankind. If you could find that and record it and prove that it wasn't a disorder in my head, but it was an outside influence.
Yeah,
it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah. So your answer to that long question, and that actually came from Morgan. Sorry, Tyler just wrote it for her. Was that basically you don't know because you don't know his childhood. You don't know whether it really is nature versus nurture. So you don't really have a comparison that you can honestly make.
No, I'm making a lot of jumps there. I'm filling a lot of gaps with my imagination and assumptions of what I believe could be true. But and I try to warn that of all my readers. I'm not one of those fellows that throws a book in your face and says, here, this is nonfiction, this is documentary. When I was filling gaps with assumptions and imagination. No, that's not fair. So it's you've got to, the Holmes story is a difficult one because you've got hundreds and hundreds of newspaper accounts, and when like I said, when you go back and read them all, they're all different. They vary. And that's why I always recommend to someone who really wants to know the Holmes story, Google up the trial transcript. It still exists. You can get word for word of his murder trial when he fired his lawyers and conducted his own defense. And he and the judge are arguing about evidentiary law. Fascinating stuff. That's why, one of my favorite movies of all time is A Few Good Men. Hollywood could go so far with a recreation of that murder trial. It would be amazing to watch.
Yeah.
Well, we do know that at some point, well, it is alleged, let me rephrase, that little Olin and a female member associated with H.H. Holmes when he was younger died mysteriously, both of drowning, I believe. Excuse me. So it would, my guess that might be his nature that perhaps was he just born bad, or was he just so smart that he just wanted to see what he could get away with, and he just was smart enough to keep escaping, so he kept pushing the envelope?
Like we discussed earlier, there was not one eyewitness to any of his murders.
Right. You're in such a gray area because it's so hard,
right?
Because of the no eyewitnesses. And back to what I said at the very beginning, this criminal mastermind genius that he was, as horrific as his actions were.
Now,
I was at a book signing. I was at a book signing. I was at a book signing in Iowa, and one of the museum curators came up and told me that he'd enjoyed the book, but he wanted to tell me that they'd had after my presentation, they'd had a meeting, and they decided that one of their skeletons in the museum had probably been purchased from H.H. Holmes.
Wow!
Back
no.
They were deciding to take it down and bury it properly. Yeah.
Wow!
I'll never forget that. Yeah.
So you were talking about how you couldn't trust a word that came out of his mouth, and him writing his memoir and publishing it while he was in prison. Now, in his memoir, he claimed to kill several people who were actually still living, right?
Oh yeah. No, the man was a liar. There's no, that he was playing poker his whole life. He was manipulating. Yeah. And then, the doubters will jump on that, what you just brought up, Ryan, and they'll say, see, we proved he didn't murder. And I'm, it's okay. That one name, you've proved that there wasn't a murder there, but I don't know how that works into any of the other missing that were associated with him. Yeah.
Right. Shelly, I know you got a question. Go for it.
Well, I'm just trying to decide which one I want to ask. Out of all of the stories about him, which do you find to be the most credible?
That's oof.
being that you just said that you say he was, of course, a pathological liar. Of course, he changed like a chameleon at every turn. What is the story you found that you believe to be the most credible about who he was?
That's
when you having practice law, for me, the most fascinating part of the Holmes story, and the one that is owned by the public record that no one can manipulate or falsify, is that trial transcript when he's arguing back and forth with the district attorney and the judge. It's you see, here's this doctor who changes hats, practices up, in prison, in jail every night, and then shows up and conducts law, which I've got to tell you, I was impressed with, and hard to believe that someone who'd never practiced law before could pull off some of these arguments. His close was very good, and it's fascinating to read if you ever get a chance. Yeah.
So there are some similarities between you and your great-great-grandfather. The law, you're both very smart. You're obviously both very
I try to
sharp.
Yeah.
And I've noticed just by looking at some of your Facebook posts that you
tried
love
to
architecture.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. It's like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah. It's no, you know what? I enjoy Facebook a lot. I have a lot of good friends on there, and it's I get up in the morning and watch the news, have my cup of coffee, and put on Facebook, see what's new comes up every morning, and I enjoy it a lot. And I tried to capture that in the book, guys, that I always knew I was different. Okay, I always knew my father was different. He wasn't a criminal. I mean, my father was a very honorable naval officer that was in Vietnam, flew jets, soft carriers, all that stuff.
Wow.
But he was always different. I always knew I was different too. We had some passed down from this evil man, not enough to want to go kill or murder, but it's something I contemplate. I still do. And it's always, I'll tell you, you know what my favorite television series of all time was?
What's that?
I used to love, do you remember Dexter?
Oh, yeah.
Love Dexter. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Dexter too, how they worked that angle about how, there was that pass down, but he worked it well. He did it the right way, even if he had to do it. So, I'm hoping someone takes a look at that one day from my story, and it'd be fun to work something like that out. The other fun I had on the whole America thing was one of my best friends now is Amaryllis, my co-host.
Yeah,
She was phenomenal.
She was awesome.
CIA agent that was.
Yeah, she was great.
Everyone loved her. Everyone loved her. I'll give you a story about Amaryllis if we have time.
Oh yeah.
It's and Shelley, you'll like this. After the show, you know who she married?
Who?
Robert Kennedy III.
You are joking.
Oh, no way.
Shut up.
Hey,
Oh,
tell
yeah.
Amaryllis.
Oh yeah.
She jumped from the Holmes curse to the Kennedy
Yeah,
curse.
she sent me pics. Their wedding was at Hyannisport, right there at the house.
Wow.
Yeah,
Of course it was.
with the Kennedy house. Yeah,
Of course it was.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
Of course
So,
it was.
Okay, I'll tell
Were
you,
you
and your
invited?
listeners will get a kick out of this. This is the yeah. I didn't, but I had something going on. But it was a mistake. I should have. But the actually, I didn't know what to get them. What would you give them?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. What are you going to give the
them?
Kennedys? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
A Rolex or something? I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, so we're there at the dig, the exhumation, and we've got it up, and we've got the fake coffin is sitting here, and we're down to the concrete, and we've cracked it open, and the most horrible smell I've ever experienced, or any of the team there in their lives comes up.
Mm-hmm.
It was terrible. And
man.
the one anthropologist didn't want to be down there. But the other one was working away, digging away, doing her job. And the director, Mark Perez, he and I had a interesting thing going on the whole shoot, but that's another story. So he asked me, he goes, "Hey, Jeff, this is about your great-great-grandfather. Why don't you jump down and help do the dig?" And I said, "I'm not going down there. It smells too terrible. It's terrible." Amaryllis throws off her shoes, jumps down, and starts digging away. I mean, that's the way she was. She was a great chick. Great chick.
Awesome.
That's funny. So I have to ask on with your great grandmother, Clara, what happened to her after H.H. Holmes passed?
She moved to California and lived in the Bay Area outside of Vallejo.
Okay.
In the San Francisco Bay Area. Yeah, which is another coincidence, another story. But it seems to always come back to that. And it's very interesting that part about her visiting him 3 times, then going back to Chicago, then coming back to see him. I know that was about her getting the assets he needed to pull off this con. I know that's what that was about. Yeah.
I gotta tell you,
I can't prove it. I can't. As like so much of the home story, I can't prove it.
Right.
I gotta tell you, if my husband, while I was married to him, had married 3 or 4 other chicks and didn't tell me about it, I'm not so sure I'd be so forgiving. But that $750,000, or was it 750 or 7,500?
7,500.
Yeah, but that might have been a difference.
That was from the Hearst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was that made him a rich man back then. Yeah, and that was just the pay he got for writing the memoirs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I don't know though. I might have held little ill will if I'd have found out you married all these other women, let alone anything else you might have done. But I'm not real good at sharing.
You know, there's another part of the story that I can never. The 3 of you might jump on this one. There's another part of the story that always finds me mystified. At the end, when they talk about what was the concrete for, what was the timber tomb around him, what was this and that, and the historians, many of the historians will write about Holmes was afraid of grave robbers, those things, and quite frankly, the man had no care whatsoever what would happen to his body after. But he converted to Catholicism before the hanging. He was even baptized, confessed all his sins. Now imagine how long that would have taken. All right.
Oh, God.
Man, he's conning all the way to the grave.
Yeah. And so he goes back to God before the hanging, and takes his original name, right? Herman Webster Mudgett, back. And while we're in the dig, while we're at the exhumation, on the top of the concrete, we find this pewter cross. And it's got his name engraved in the cross. I don't recall if history put this on the American Ripper or not. I don't recall.
I don't think so.
Not
the show was 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
They probably they did they anything that didn't fit the story. But anyway, so we found this pewter cross with this name engraved on it, right, with the date of the hanging and burial of the hanging. And in the pewter, despite having just gone back to Jesus, taken his Catholic name back, confessed all his sins, right there, H. Holmes. And I always thought that was that evil little man's way of another joke. It was another joke.
Yeah.
Man.
Why? Why would you go with that name? Like you
Because
said,
it wasn't him. It wasn't him. It wasn't him down there.
damn,
Yeah.
that's compelling.
Man.
Yeah. Great stuff.
That
Great
is why
stuff.
he
That's
is one of-
Scorsese could run with that too.
That is why this is one of my favorite guilty pleasure serial killers to read about and dig things up on, because just like you say, Jeff, every turn has another turn behind it, and there's a twist after that. If you don't be careful, there's a loop at the end that's going to lead you right back to another twist, another turn, another drop, and another loop. And just trying to
everyone.
figure out all of it.
Everyone.
There is sometimes no end to some of the stories. Sometimes it just peters out and there's no end to this, but suddenly you find him here. And it's like, well, what happened between point A and point B? So I am fascinated. He is one of the ones that I truly love to dig into. And just if anybody wanted to know exactly how big of an H. Holmes fan I am, I do have my coffee cup here that says everything I need to know about architecture I learned from H. Holmes, just to make sure you can see that. I wanted to make sure that Jeff knew that I had this tonight, and I have been drinking my beverages out of it. This is how much of a fan of this story and this mastermind and this truly, there's nothing to admire about this man except the genius, the unfettered genius of the way his mind worked, not his deeds. But you got to admire the mind if you can't find anything else to admire. Would you guys agree? If our brains worked half that good,
Yeah,
wow.
I would agree.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
One of the newspapers, when the jury returned with the verdict and the judge announced sentence and they chained him back up to lead him off, one of the newspapers report of there were 4 or 5 women back in the audience who stood up and were crying crocodile tears as they led him off prison. And it was that to me is always, wow, the man there was something else there that we're not picking up yet. There was something there that we don't understand. It was different. And unfortunately, I don't know if we'll ever get the answer, but things like that, that's why when people come back and say he wanted to be buried in concrete because he was afraid of grave robbers, no, that's not why I was.
He just didn't want you to know what was there.
So now that you've said that, I got to ask, even though I'm sure he was upset that he was caught, and I'm sure he was mad that he couldn't continue to work his scams out and continue to murder like he had been previously, do you think while he was locked up that he reveled in his newfound celebrity status?
That, and me trying to tell your listener or give a guess to your listeners how he was thinking is beyond me. But I'll tell you this: I think if the people always say, why was there only one at the murder trial? Why was there only one victim during the trial? And I always try to tell them, listen, if the jury had come back and found him not guilty, they would have just moved him to another jurisdiction and tried him for another murder. They had 4 or 5 that the jurisdictions awaiting their chance. They could have sent him to Texas to hang him for horse thief. Texans wanted to hang him. So Why? I don't know about. I think, Ryan, what he was doing, he was
Mhm.
using this trial, and this is another where I go way out there beyond the others, and
Mhm.
and I'll get a lot of head shakes out of this. But what
Mhm.
I think he was doing was using this trial, wanting that sentence and the jury verdict, and then knowing Moyamensing prison. There was some reason he knew Moyamensing prison and why he wanted it there, and then working this all out to where he had the blank check to start his new life over again. And I call it a blank check, and I can't prove it. I don't know it, but that's what I think happened.
So we've been alluding to it all night. Now we haven't really talked about it in depth, but you have a new book that's coming out called Bloodstains. And if you would give us just a brief summary of what it entails, we'd love to hear about it.
Well, I'm incorporating the last 12 years of work in television, of new investigations, of forensic science, going on shows like yours, into my original Bloodstains, which is 12 years old now. And the book's called Bloodstains Redux. I have a new website coming out. If your listeners would like a copy, if they follow my Bloodstains Facebook page, in a week or two, we're going to be providing the link there for them to go to the new website. And for 2 days, we're going to be offering it as a free download, the ebook. So anyone that would like to take a look, and I always tell people now, if you don't like it, delete it. It's an ebook,
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
but it's going to be free. It's going to be free. So if they go to the Bloodstains Facebook page, just follow. And like I said, we'll be providing the link there. And if they miss the free limited period, it's only going to be the price of a cup of coffee anyway. I'm just trying to cover my costs there.
Mhm.
And but it's all about being on the show with all the history guys. It's all about the Jack the Ripper, the new evidence. It's all about the exhumation. It's all about the paranormal part of the story that I was afraid to include in the first edition. Yeah, about when I developed this, I developed that condition called epilepsy when I discovered the material from my grandfather about my great-grandfather, and I started having those seizures, and the neurologists were explaining to me that the voices and visions that I was hearing, are very normal under an epileptic seizure condition. But then I ran into one neurologist who said she wasn't so sure about that. She thought that maybe that epilepsy is a mental condition, allow you to be more perceptive to those senses around you while while a presence is occurring. And so I try to explain how she explained that to me in the book, and it's fascinating stuff.
I know that's cool.
So
So you
take a
guys
look, see
got
what
it?
you guys think. I know that's your field. That's what you guys are experts in.
Yeah.
I already follow it, Jeff.
Yeah.
I've been stalking you for a while.
I cannot wait to read that.
So you guys go get on and follow the Bloodstains
Good, I'm
Facebook
hoping-
page. You will see that link that he'll put up in a week or so. And our viewers can download it for free for the first 2 days. So make sure you follow it so that you don't miss that link, because I'm already there and I am waiting anxiously. Jeff mentioned it to me and I'm like, I am watching. I am ready. I cannot wait to go and read this. Blake, do we have some more questions that maybe we haven't addressed or anything like that? Because I know we were having an issue with our question feed a little while ago.
No, not right now. Everybody's just commenting how fascinated they are at all of this.
I know. I was the same way. I'm sitting there going, I should probably ask a question, but I'm too busy listening.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
well, guys, I've got about 5 more minutes. So give me a couple of good questions.
Well, Ryan or Blake, do you have one? Because I've kind of manipulated the questions.
I don't. And 5 minutes is about our sign off time frame. So that's
So Jeff, let's
enough.
let you go out with us right here. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Shelley Pruitt, and this is Blake Smith, Ryan Roberts, and we want to say thank you to our very special guest, Mr. Jeff Mudgett. Sir, we so appreciate your time, and thank you so much for making our 1 year anniversary episode so very special. We are truly grateful, and I could not have imagined having a better guest to make our 1 year so special.
Yes, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
the current viewers and listeners, hang on for just a second. We got a couple announcements, but we are going to let Mr. Jeff Mudgett go for now, so we see he has 5 minutes. We appreciate your time, Jeff. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so very
sir.
much.
You have an
We
open
appreciate your time.
you have an open invitation with us anytime you want to come back on. You just let us know if you have anything to promote.
Absolutely.
Well, I tell you what, this has been fun. I'm honored to be your 1 year anniversary guest. And next year, when we find out that Scorsese and DiCaprio and Hulu are finally going to do it, let's have another show and talk about what I'm hearing from the Hollywood insiders. That'd be fun.
That sounds like a
That'd be
blast.
awesome.
Jeff, it's a date, and I've told you now, you said it on air, and I tend to hold people to what they tell me on air. Don't you stand me up now.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Jeff.
sir.
Thanks
you
again,
so
Jeff.
much.
Good night.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Good
Jeff.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, y'all hang around for just a little bit. We're letting him sign off real fast. And then we've got a couple of additional things that we want to tell y'all. How fascinating.
Y'all,
How
I knew I was
cool.
supposed to be asking questions, but I got interested in the stories. Look at me, I'm about to cry. I was so excited.
No,
Seriously.
the story is just so fascinating. And like we were saying, if you have never delved into this story, go look it up. Like he was saying, a Hollywood writer couldn't write a story this good. I mean, this story is
I want y'all to
fascinating.
This is how excited I am. I have tears in my eyes. Gentlemen, 1 year, there is no one else I'd rather do it with than you guys.
Same.
Me neither.
And I love both of y'all. And Jeff Mudgett was on my bucket list, and I get to talk to him. Even though I was dorking out, my apologies.
Oh, no
Tell them what they
apologize.
need to know, and let's get off here.
I know.
Aw.
know. So, guys, as Shelly said, that was our 1 year anniversary. Next week starts season 2. Couple of things we are changing up for season 2. We've got more content. We've got free giveaways. We've got drawings. We've got whatever you can think of. We got merch. We've got so much more coming your way. So remember, whatever social media channel you are following us on, we are not just on that channel. We are on YouTube, soon to be on Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Make sure that you go and follow us across the board, because we don't use every social media platform for everything. We use them all differently. And we're about to have our investigation episodes that are going to be dropping exclusively on YouTube. So go and subscribe to YouTube. Search Everything Vaguely Paranormal on any platform and look for the green sound wave. Shelly, take it away.
And if you want to know what we really talk about, go and sign up for the Patreon account. It's $5 a month. There aren't tiers, not 5, 10, 15. $5 a month, you get everything. You get the pre-broadcast, the soon-to-be post-broadcast, our exclusive Paracon videos from our appearances there, and there are more to come. And also, you'll be getting something brand new for season 2. We're going to have, if you sign up for Patreon, you're going to go into an exclusive VIP drawing. And if you're a winner, you will come on a live stream with us. You will get to ask us anything, and we will be at your mercy and answer any questions you have for us. Now, once you do this, you are entered into an exclusive drawing to be on a Patreon member only VIP investigation with us. It will cost you nothing but the price it takes you to get there. The location will be provided by us, and you will be with us at a location with
Absolutely.
other Patreon members.
And you never know where it may be.
Yes. And if you want to sign up, you can look at the link scrolling across the bottom of the screen, which is patreon.com/EVP podcast, AVP, yes, podcast. And you can sign up today to be a Patreon member. And what else do they need to know, Ryan?
So go and follow us on anywhere you get your fine podcast. Go and subscribe on the YouTube page. Hit the little bell, like and subscribe. Please comment. Please share us with 2 friends and have them share us with 2 friends. And also, speaking of 2, what we're going to be doing on Patreon on the pre-broadcast and the post-broadcast. Now it's going to be 2 Question Tuesday. If you guys have any questions you want to ask us, just send those questions in, and we will answer 2 questions every Tuesday. And
I'm very against this, by the way.
No, you're not. No, you're not. You signed off on everything under. You signed off on everything under duress. It was fair. But anyways, if you do have those questions, you can send those over to the evppod@gmail.com. That's THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Like,
Shelly,
share, and subscribe.
Shelly, get us out of here, girl.
So thank you so much for watching everything Vaguely Paranormal. Thank you for your support over this past year, whether you came in on episode 1 or just coming in on episode 52 or came on in somewhere in the middle. We are so grateful for you, and we so appreciate you. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us and for letting us come and see you every week on Tuesday. I'm Shelly Pruitt. For my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Mr. Ryan Roberts, we will see you next Tuesday. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.